Welcome to Modern Anarchy, the podcast featuring real conversations with conscious objectors to the status quo. I'm your host, Nicole.
I tried to keep her quiet, but she's screaming outside of me. I tried to keep her hiding, oh, shut up. I tried to keep her quiet, but she's a wild, wild woman.
On today's episode, we have polyamorous research psychologist Dr. Joli Hamilton join us for a conversation on jealousy within non-monogamy and creating the relationships you desire. Together, we talk about creative versus boilerplate monogamy, relationship agreements, and letting our partners be multiple. Ooh, y'all, I don't know about you, but I just love any sort of theoretical discussion on polyamory, relationships, all the things that run through my mind when I look at all of humanity and the way that we connect. And so I just love getting to sit back and have someone else just share the beauty that is their creative thoughts and lessons and all these different things that Dr. Joli Hamilton has learned. It was just such a pleasure to get to connect with her and hear from her decade of experience navigating polyamorous relationships. So thank you, Dr. Joli. I really had such a pleasure chatting with you, and I think everyone here is really going to enjoy hearing about your work. Y'all, tune in. I'm loving this color-coded bookshelf. Wow, yeah.
It definitely cheers up my all the time spent on Zoom.
Oh, yeah, seriously. Yeah, have a little bit of a rainbow behind you.
Exactly.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm very good. It's a nice Monday. It's sunny.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's cold, but...
Where are you at?
Western Mass.
Okay.
So out on the, Smith College, Mount Holyoke side of things, not the Boston side of things. How about you?
Okay. I'm in Chicago, so I don't know much about Boston, anything at all. I'm originally from California, which is what I know, and then just moved to Chicago after college, so...
Lovely.
Been here for about 5 years now, so this is what I know.
I hear such good things about Chicago lately. I feel like it's really getting some legs under it when it comes to alternative communities and yeah. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. I mean, I hope so, and I hope to be a part of that movement, right?
Yeah.
How can I help build those communities here?
Right.
I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, I mean, you said that you studied jealousy.
That is what I did my doctoral dissertation on. Yeah, and I have a second field study going right now. I'm just about to announce it.
Okay, wow. Okay, so what is your doctorate in?
Depth psychology. So I studied Jungian and archetypal psychology. Yeah, kicking it really old school.
I so want to know what that means.
Yeah. So for me, what that meant was I had rejected the concept of behaviorism as the base of, while understanding its usefulness, decided that wasn't what I wanted my base to be, was behaviorism. So I was looking around for other options, and Jungian and archetypal psychology really takes you into the mythological, the original use of the word psyche as soul. So not religious, but into what is story, what is mythology, what is, it leans far more towards the philosophical than toward the behavioral. So, and now I'm actually 7/8 of the way done with a second master's degree in a clinical program to kind of balance out my learning base. And I definitely picked right the first time for my fit, to fit me right.
Yeah, I'm so curious because I'm in a clinical psyche, so I don't know how much I'm going to go into Jungian, philosophical. I have some books from my humanistic existential framework that seem to be tying in some ideas about spirituality and other things, but I'm not sure if I'm even going to get that level of study with my current program.
That's totally what I found. I was It felt like an either-or choice, which was frustrating at the time. But later I realized how simple it would be for me to get my base in something and then add the other pieces. So for me, especially because I knew that I was going to practice as a coach, I didn't want to work in community mental health. So it made sense to go ahead and go this direction. It also let me do my dissertation on whatever I wanted.
Oh, yeah.
I got to really drive the ship there, and that was awesome. I mean,
amazing.
Lucky me.
Yeah. I still want to know, what is the difference? Like, I get, like, I know, and this might be a really big question, but, like, as someone also in the field of psychology and equally curious about these things, one of the only things I know from Jung is that concept of, like, these moments in time where you see these small connections of the universe that seem to make sense.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, that's all I've kind of heard about it and hung onto, and I recently talked about it with my friends the other night and wanted to learn more, so maybe you could just give me a little bit.
Yeah, there's so many great starting spots for Jung's work, and I really feel like he's one of those figures that we have to, like, draw from and then allow ourselves to do some death of the author, because he's still, you know, he's a white cis male from Western Europe. I mean, we have to be thoughtful about that. But the baseline of what he talked about, he used the alchemical metaphor to describe psyche. That means alchemy, you know, the idea of turning lead into gold. Right?
Yeah.
Like that old. Yeah. So it's really taken on as a philosophical approach of, like, managing change. What is change? We are lead. We want to become gold. It's a developmental process. That's all. But rather than seeing it as a thing that's happening to us, which developmental psych has turned into a bit of like, we get that sense that it unfolds in a natural sense. The alchemical metaphor leans more heavily into the, like, post-traumatic growth. Like, what do I do with myself? How do I actively participate in my growth and development? So a lot of the things that are found in Jungian psychology apply really well to that post-midlife transition. Not so much for childhood. Like, you know, like, Freud didn't get everything wrong. Like, he's not completely wrong about everything, but, like, you know.
Yeah, exactly. There's a chunk of things he was.
There's, like, he was wrong, but then he had these seeds, right, that were just so useful.
Yes.
And that's the part. So in the depth psychological realm, I try not to take my child development too seriously from that realm. But I do take my adult development, and I do take, like, gaining wisdom and growing older, and that, well, I'm sure you've seen this already. You know how you have clients who want something more from, they want something more. They didn't just come because they have an ouch, but they're, like, lost and seeking those folks. And that, I knew that was my, like, those are my folks. I'm really good. I'm good at calling a bullshitter out. I'm good at, at, like, not letting somebody philosophize their way around things.
Ooh.
So
that might be me.
Yeah, right. Exactly. and I needed that. So this was me finding a way that would help me really call myself out and be in a pond that fits. Whereas, I mean, I love somatic work for trauma. I love, you know, like, there are so many other modalities that are super useful, and they actually all fit really well with depth psychology, because you can see it as it's an ever expanding field. It's really just at core taking the unconscious really seriously. Taking the unconscious really, really seriously, and understanding that whatever metaphor works for you is the best one to lean into. Like, if the idea of growth or alchemy or just the concept of trauma. We're seeing people right now, I think, grab onto the idea of trauma because it helps them make sense out of the pain they're feeling.
Yeah.
And then other people who are like, oh, do not give me that. Don't, like, label me that way. I'm not the sum of the things that happen to me, right?
Yeah.
So depth psych gave me a way to have more metaphors to offer folks. So it's been super useful.
I love that. Yeah, interesting. I'm so intrigued in, like, the difference between that and humanistic existential, because when you're talking about this post-midlife crisis, I'm thinking, like, humanistic, like, where are you at? Where's your meaning? Yeah, what's your purpose?
I think most of the humanistic existentialists, like, their work grew right out of psychodynamics, but most people think of psychodynamics over in the Freudian camp, right?
Yes.
And that's not where the humanists and existentialists turned. They turned to Adler and Jung.
Yeah.
Like when they were reading. So if you read Winnicott, you're reading a basis of European still, you know, that English sensibility. So it has this sort of, there is a Freudian tinge, but you're reading a very strong Jungian flexibility. Jung was much more flexible. Like, he didn't believe everything was about sex. He didn't believe anything. He wasn't that narrow. Also, he was deeply flawed, which is kind of awesome. Like, to see somebody be so deeply flawed and so brilliant at the same time. And then the humanists, I think, they're the bridge between, like, the humanists are the bridge between the old school depth psych and then behaviorism. And then they stood there like you could see the books like, okay, I see we're going to have to help people through this like rigid, like formal way. How can I make humanistic approaches work? They did a job that, I mean, we're still wrestling with, right? How do we put the human back in? But Jung was, when people tell me like, oh, I take a dialectic approach, I'm like, there's nothing more dialectic than a Jungian analysis. There really isn't. Like, he was all about the relationship. He really felt that the only thing was the relationship you had to yourself and the relationship you had to the people who you made relationships with. And that included your analyst. Like, your analyst was somebody who was going to be with you for years.
Yep. I'm also very relational. Psychology, like feminist theory is kind of where I lean to of, it's all about the relationship that you're creating with the person in that therapeutic space.
Exactly.
And bringing your full human self into that because, I mean, back in the day, Freud and some of those people kind of had this more like power dynamic of, you don't see me.
Blank slate.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm the, clinician here versus, I'm a human with my own flaws.
Right. When somebody told me once, they're like, well, I don't believe in the unconscious because I don't believe in blank slates. I'm like, that's not what the unconscious is. That's not it. Yeah. And the conversation wound up being about a mistake being made. And I think this happens a lot, especially at master's level clinician programs, where they brush past so much of the psychodynamics. They don't go into it far enough to realize, and this is what I found now in this program I'm in now, they don't go into it far enough to realize the difference between an unconscious and motivations, and the difference between acknowledging the relationship in the room and acknowledging that stuff's happening in the room. You know what I mean? Like, maybe they're comfortable naming the fact that stuff's coming up in the room, but forgetting like, you're that stuff. I as clinician, if I am in the room, my stuff's here too.
Yes, completely.
So I have to own it.
Oh, completely.
Like, really own it.
Oh,
and
yes. Yeah. I feel like that is one of the biggest skills I'm learning as I'm, becoming a clinician is, how what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, my context, that's how I respond in the language, in the questions I ask. Right. And so if I can't constantly look in while someone else is also speaking to think, okay, why do I want to respond this way? And all that internal gear spinning, then I am not doing, my work as a clinician and being there for the person. Right. It's so much in there.
It's hard. Yeah. It's a lot. There's a lot in there. Exactly. And that's where I found that when I felt met by my analyst for the first time, like the first time I had an analyst who could really meet me there, I'm like, this is what they mean by therapeutic. Yeah. And so for me, that was where I happened to find it in that container of analysis, but I wouldn't have found it if he'd been a blank slate person. If he'd been like everything you see here is about you. It has nothing to do with, no way. And I would have called bullshit on that. Because that's not true. Like, we're always talking to people. We're real people.
For sure, yeah. And I mean, and I've also always chosen female therapists and psychologists. Yeah, if I had a male psychologist, it'd be a whole different thing for my own, like, history of male trauma and other things that I would have to bring into the room that, like, hey, this is a hard space for me. Yeah, that stuff is always happening. It's impossible to get away from it.
And I had my first truly therapeutic experience when I had my analyst passed away just last month, just a few weeks ago. But he was almost 96. Yeah. Right? Like so it's a completion, a transition. But I did not have that truly therapeutic experience until I was working with him. And it never in a million years would have occurred to me that would happen with an older white male, like hot, like upper middle class, all the privilege, raised in a wealthy family. Never would have thought so. Yeah. But because he reflected to me through mythology, through symbols, and was present for himself. He was so present for himself. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That was when the switch flipped and I was like, oh, okay. I can be fully here. So I could show up totally. Because I don't think I'd ever shown up fully in a therapeutic space before. Because if you meet people and you can run circles around them, not because they're not smart, but because they're like working in a very small container of like, this is what we're working on. And it's very tight. Like, let's problem solve, get your coping skills, get you back up.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that is not my therapist. No,
that
like
work.
CBT lens of kind of, like, here we are, let's learn skills, let's put you back out into the world. Yeah, no, it's a whole different orientation to be in the relationship, to acknowledge that you could be talking about anything in this space and it still be therapeutic.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
100%.
I know. Yeah. Having a human that will hold you, see you. And in that, I think it's so much so reflecting healthy relationships. Yes. And having that, then you go into your own relationships with that same level of healthiness. Even just the concept of holding space for the other person to speak and not interrupting them, and learning that with a, clinician, and then you take that, it infinitely changes how you are in your relationships.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are so many paths.
Yes.
There's so many wonderful paths. Yes. And when I heard the title of your podcast, I was like, awesome. Here for that. Yeah. Let's go there.
Hell
That's
yeah.
great.
Yeah. I know. It was so funny. I literally was talking about Jung to my friends on Saturday night, and I was talking about, that synchronicity. And one of my friends was like, oh, you should have him on the podcast. And I was like, I wish that would be possible. It's like saying, let's have Freud on the podcast, and I was like, she doesn't work in psychology, so it's a whole different realm. But I like to think that, like, people like you and I, we are those people.
That's exactly what Jung said. So Jung had this great line. He said, I'm so glad I'm Jung and not a Jungian. And what he meant is because he charged us with dreaming the dream forward. He didn't charge us with repeating his work. And that's actually why I find his work still relevant.
I love that.
He said the point was to follow the dream, not him. He wrote his dream. He wrote. Anyone who can let go of their thing to that degree, to let go of the thing they've created, that gives me more respect, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, and I mean, the context of that time to now, I mean, you have to keep changing and evolving to be able to actually be, effective in this current time.
100%.
I mean, the internet alone,
God.
like, just like, I would die to hear the metaphors that, he would have, or Freud, about what the internet is doing to our psyche and all these other things. We've created a whole nother world digitally.
Right.
It's insane.
And it's so fast.
Yes.
I was just talking to my partner about this, about how 20 years ago, like I have a lot of, I'm 45, so I have plenty of memories of 20 years ago. And they're adult memories. They're like, this is how I lived, this is how I made decisions. And just 20 years later, I have grown children who are now young adults. And I'm like, their psyche is so clearly different because of just the information that they have.
Yep.
Their fingertips. And it's not like I feel old yet. I feel very much middle-aged. But it's a completely, like, the psychic shift feels extreme versus between my parents and my age.
Sure. I mean, completely. Think about, and I am, of that generation that grew up with the internet literally in my hand. And so when I have a question, I can find out any answer at any second and just Google it. I don't have to sit with any level of uncertainty about any questions, about anything in the world. And so then when it comes to making decisions, I wonder, like, how does that level of just like answers right in my pocket make making decisions so much harder? Because I want the answer. I can get it right here. But then when it comes to bigger questions, like, what is love? How do we do relationships? What is happiness? The internet does not seem to have those answers.
Totally. And you can get any answer you want.
Yes,
you said, like, I feel like you gave it away in the line. You can get any answer you want. So first, you can only get an answer to a question you've asked. So, which we understand from our research processes. But also, you will, and your internet now is so smart, air quotes, giant air quotes around smart. So it will feed you the answer that you want, or an answer closer to that. Now what do we do? Are we actually, like, leaving an older consciousness and entering, like, a new sphere? Or
completely.
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not here now. It feels like that would be out there, but I think we're there.
Completely. I mean, it's changing how people see truth. And we know that, right? We know that people find these, articles, these pieces, and, glom onto that and then take that to be truth versus, the older model where it was, my friends and I were talking about this, like, how do you fix, plumbing or something? You would just go to your community friend that knew how to do that, or your family member versus, okay, I'm going to watch a YouTube tutorial on this, and just everything about how we learn truth, knowledge. It has changed so much. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I know. And this is also where I think about like the internet and how has the internet changed the way that we relate to people. I mean, we are now in a world of an abundance of connection compared to, you know, our smaller little communities where you date and have relationships within this little knit clan.
Yep.
And now we have things like the metaverse, which I don't even know too much about yet, but
me either, but here it is. Just about it. We're on the precipice.
Yeah. Yes. Have you seen that Black Mirror episode where they like play in the VR?
I haven't. But I was just talking about the idea of like, what does dating become now that because I'm seeing this. So as a polyamorous person, I identify as polyamorous and I've been practicing for over a decade. And it feels like this is like, that specifically, the way that you could connect to a person without physical connection feels like it shifts the whole game around multiple love connections.
Yep.
Because now some of the great big hindrances, geography and physical bodily exchange of fluids, now you just take them away. Now what do you got?
Yeah.
The whole world changes.
Exactly.
Because those are like two of the hugest issues people bring into the room with me. It's like, well, how would I meet people? And then if I did, how do I do this with any kind of sense of safety, for lack of a better word? Well, what if we do it in a meta-universe?
Exactly. That is exactly what happens in the episode of Black Mirror. I'll push you to watch that.
Okay, I got it. I'm going to have to watch it.
Yeah, because that's what happens. It's like this world where they can like go into it and, you know, it's a little bit more futuristic where you actually have the physical sensations of that universe.
Yes.
And kind of the episode is playing with that level of, you know, this man in a married relationship, monogamous, but in this other world. And, you know, you ask that question, is that cheating? It's not real physical contact.
Yeah, and what's real now?
Exactly.
We literally can't, we have to redefine real.
Exactly, and really rethink what relationships are. Oh, okay. I'm so curious. How did you get into polyamory? You have a decade of this. I mean, yeah, where did you start?
Yeah. Okay, I started, I had a numinous experience. You know, want to talk depth psychology. I was on a dance floor for the first time ever because I never did the bar scene. I had babies during my 20s instead. I was on a dance floor and I was dancing with somebody I'd known literally my whole life. He had held me as a baby.
Oh.
And a lightning bolt literally struck, like right down through my spine.
Ooh.
It's the unknowable thing, right? Like sometimes you feel something so deeply that you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And in my naivete, I was like, awesome. Surely this can work out some way. I had fallen in love with lots of women before. And so I just told my husband. I got in the shower with him and told him. Oof. He was not jazzed about that. I was so naive.
Oh, say more. Yeah, I want to know.
Yeah, that's it. I was so naive that I really thought that would work. And when it didn't, I mean, we broke up within 45 days.
Really?
It was so fast because husband.
Oof.
So yeah, so it was, and we'd had 4 biological children, and we had just opened a new business, and
wow,
it was brutal.
45 days.
45 days. Boom. We were divorced within 5 months, like so fast. But here's the kicker, and here's why it matters. The idea of multiplicity was in my bones. Ooh. So I really thought, like, well, we didn't have a great sex life. So I was like, what's the difference? Like, if am I attracted to someone else, why would you care? And so when I knew that to be true, and he was so unwilling and unable to go there, I knew that we were done. Yeah. Like there was just a philosophical split there that I was like, oh, these two things can't stand next to each other, because he needed me, and these were his words, to not feel this way.
Yeah.
I was willing to control my behavior. I was willing to not have sex. I was willing to, but he needed me not to feel this way, and I didn't know how not to feel this way.
Yeah.
So I had to find another path. I needed a new word. I didn't have the word polyamory.
Right.
I didn't have...
Right.
We had the book, The Ethical Slut. I didn't even know it existed. And it was 2nd edition, not 3rd edition. And that was, like, there was nothing. I didn't know these words. I knew the word swinging.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But as a thing people did.
Yeah.
Not like a thing suburban moms did.
Sure.
But on the other hand, when I told this person I had fallen head over heels for, when I told his wife, she was like, cool. No problem. We already do that.
Wow.
We've been open the whole time.
Wow.
So I was like, okay. So I wound up moving in with them.
Wow.
Yep. And we lasted 2.5 years as a triad. And then that didn't work out. But oddly enough, and actually not that oddly in the realm of polyamory, I wound up staying and she left. I am now married to that guy.
Wow.
Very happily, like disgustingly, disturbingly happily.
I love this. I do love this.
So I decided to just continue to follow this path. We've been letting it unfold for all of these 12 years. It's a wild ride to step off the relationship escalators.
Yes.
And to do it. We have 7 children.
Wow.
You know, they're like, it's a really bizarre set of circumstances to have like this very suburban soccer mom looking life and to be like, yeah, but I fall in love with other people. And what do we do about that?
Yes, completely.
And,
So I love this distinction that you were talking about where your ex-husband wanted you to stop the feeling.
Yeah.
Like something that is so natural to your being that you feel, I'm sure, in your body. Yeah. And I love that distinction between, I could control the behavior, but I cannot stop what I naturally feel. That is absolutely impossible. And, part of me wants to even push back on him and say, what does it matter? Why do you need to have possession of your emotional feelings and sex life to feel security?
And that was exactly the problem. He actually became so possessive that it was no longer safe for us to be in the same space. And he'd always had a very relaxed attitude about I was out as bi my whole life, and he'd always had a very relaxed attitude. So here we were faced with patriarchal attitudes that I don't believe he really wanted to be enacting.
Yes,
but this was a man. This was a man who he had known his whole adult life, a man who was his very close friend. And instead of being able to talk about it, it just broke us. Interestingly, though, and I actually give him a lot of credit for this, he held me responsible rather than holding this love object that I had, this person who I wanted, which I actually give him a lot of credit for because a lot of people would blame the interrupter. This is why I wound up studying jealousy, right? Yeah. A lot of people want to blame the third party.
Sure.
But my ex was very clear that it was a relationship between he and I that was being interrupted. And he wanted me to make that promise. So on the one hand, I'm like, possession, and it was awful, and there was lots of bad stuff. On the other, I have respect for being able to, we co-parent, now. And
have to,
his biological children, my children call him Da, like they just do. So we figured that part out. And that's what gave me hope that jealousy might not be the thing we thought it was.
Ooh.
That's why I wound up studying jealousy specifically. I studied polyamory, but I studied jealousy through the lens of polyamory.
Yes. Wow. Okay. So I am recently on a journey with a partner that had never heard of polyamory or anything, a male partner that I have been pulling into this space, and he is very receptive to it, but at times I'm pulling with these same ideas of like the possession, the jealousy, and having some flexibility in it now, but I feel like it always comes back to this sense that, or at least what he expressed to me as someone who's coming new into poly, was that he feels like I'm just going to get up and leave at any point. Like I'm just going to go, like leave. And I get that, right? Like the security of being, I am your only person. I am this, and feeling that. But I try to explain to him, like, that is not possible. Even if I'm in a monogamous relationship, divorce is always on the table. And even if I'm in a monogamous relationship, it's the question of how much time and energy am I spending with my studies, with my, friends, other people, family, all these other relationships. I can never be just, invested to one person. I'm always going to be spread out between people, things, dreams.
Right.
Yeah, like
You're going to be multiple, regardless.
Yes.
And this is where I find I've been working with people a lot lately I've been developing this term creative monogamy because I really believe some people, what I see is a lot of folks who want a very hierarchical design, right? They have children, finances, all of that. Mm-hmm. And rather than just say, that's bad, I invite some curiosity into what if you are honest with yourself about wanting security around, say, who you share finances with, but you are able to do the work to unpack who you share hugs with, who you share sex with, or who you share a bed with or time with.
Yep.
Like, those things are the tougher ones to unpack, but usually if people can get more specific,
yep,
the conversations allow them to now share more of themselves.
Yep.
A common spot I find people get stuck on is, can we share our sexual fantasies? First, can we share them with each other? Now, what if we're sharing them with other people?
Mm-hmm.
Now we're back in the Black Mirror episode too. Is it like, is our fantasy, does our fantasy life, does our sexual fantasy life, does it belong to our partner? Because in my book, it doesn't.
Exactly.
It's literally my psyche. This is it.
Yeah.
And I'm co-creating a fantasy space in every conversation I ever have anyways. So how do I have the conversations with a partner who's been steeped in monogamy that allow them to feel some security, but not an unrealistic? Monogamy writes checks it can't cash.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
It just does. I wish it didn't. I wish there was some way that we could promise those folks who are really desiring of that. But we stopped that when we stopped, killing people for wanting out of a marriage.
Yes.
So that's over. And most marriages end in divorce.
Yep.
Just realistically.
Exactly, statistically.
So here we go. If we're going to be realistic, I find that having the conversations that let me know what I can count on my partner for and what they can't promise me and what they are grown up enough to tell me they can't promise me, which I appreciate a lot. Like, I can't promise you that is one of the things I love most about a partner. It's what shows me that I can trust them. Can't promise you that. There's such honesty there.
Exactly. I love Esther Perel's work. She talks about how we say we're all monogamous, but what monogamy used to mean was you married one person and you did not remarry, and you had sex with one person and that was it. Yet we go through these different levels of monogamous relationships, in different short times, and then do it again and do it again and do it again. And it's interesting because I try to push people on this idea of, like, what does it mean to have, a sacredness of a relationship? Like, I've had sex with other people. You have had sex with other people. And I know that coming into this dynamic. Does that somehow mean that our connection right now is less because in the past you've done it? And I think when you take that lens to it and say, oh, you know what? No, it doesn't. It's the moment that we have now. You can also project that to the future. If I do it with other people, does it somehow take away from this moment? No, not at all. It's because we've made commitments that we have chosen to each other. And that's what's important.
This is where I find there is a lot of growth space for almost everybody. Whether you want the most exclusive monogamy, possible, or whether you want, total relationship anarchy, wherever you are in that, if you can talk about it honestly, then you can co-create something that could potentially work. But most folks who are practicing what I call boilerplate monogamy aren't invited into the conversation. So they don't actually know what they've promised. And I found that out when I went to get divorced. The presumption is that I have promised all of these things that I did not promise. They were not in our vows. I never signed a piece of paper. But this little signature on a marriage license, it has all this connotation and denotation.
Yes.
That then becomes not just legally, but morally. I lost all my friends in that divorce. All of them. Gone.
Wow.
And that's about the assumptions about what my marriage was. But those people weren't on the inside of my marriage.
No.
And that's a really normal thing that happens in our society. And these are problems that are way outside of what we usually think about when we're talking about the sanctity of marriage. I think about, what about the sanctity of friendship? What about having conversations that allow people to be their whole selves, even if that means they don't fit into a typical box?
Oh, yeah. Completely. It just blows my mind that monogamy, that one word, that decision that we make with, some other person has a slew of expectations. That you're going to live together, that you're going to want to have kids or not, but at least live together, share finances, spend the most of your time together, all these other pieces. And so, when I'm sitting with my partner and, he's saying, I still want monogamy, I ask, what is it that you want? And he kind of laughed at that question. I was like, what do you mean? And I'm like,
that's it.
Oh, I am asking you very specifically, what do you want? Is it sexual fidelity? Do you want that exclusiveness? Do you want to live together? Do you want to, like, what are the things that you want? And let's create that together. And that's why I love that you said creative monogamy. I've been trying to find a word for this too. Like it's this freedom to create the relationship that you want with the commitment and boundaries that you want, freely chosen.
Totally. And to understand that, so the way I frame creative monogamy, it by definition must be revisited regularly.
Oof, yeah.
You are a growing, changing human being, and so is your partner. Therefore, there needs to be, yes, always an open door to have a conversation, but more importantly for me is a pattern of revisiting. Not just relationship check-ins, but full on. So in my relationship, once a year, there's a full on, we go through our whole relationship checklist. It's at this point pretty extensive, many pages.
I want this.
And then every 3 years, we do a full off-ramp option. If we don't both re-up, divorce is on the table.
Wow.
It's a reality check about what it means to be together.
Yes.
Which doesn't mean we're not flexible. My brother was very, very ill during one of our 3-year periods. And he was in my home and we were both nursing him through his illness. Wow. He wound up passing away. We delayed our conversation. Like we weren't going to, like there was no heartlessness in this. It wasn't, it was still within the paradigm of our relating. So we delayed it.
Yeah.
Had that conversation a year later in that case.
Yes.
But have it knowing that it's coming, knowing that, in fact, this coming September is a 3-year mark. It's so exciting. It literally is exciting because I get excited about the things I'm going to find out as we get toward that date. And we're both thinking about this and we're considering what our options are. It's not for the faint of heart because you have to really really own the fact, the fact that nothing is guaranteed except death.
Yep.
Even taxes can be evaded, but
you leave the country. Yes.
Right? But I can't imagine being more sure of what I'm choosing because of this.
Yes. This is exactly what I said, that this is not for the faint of heart. This is extremely difficult work to show up as your full self, full vulnerability. These things scare me. These are the things I want. And to be able to have to do that with a partner and create all these different things is extremely difficult. But wow, would I not want to trade that for anything in the world? Because I think that allows the deepest level of intimacy, authentic expression that you could ever have in this life. I'm so curious. I want to hear what is on your checklist. What do you
Oh gosh. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff. What I have, I'm working on this as a long-term project. I've been working with these questions for the whole 12 years we've been together. What exactly are we promising to each other? And I divide them up into categories about, what does it mean to share a household? What does it mean to share a bed? What does it mean? What do I want out of time? What does it mean to be honoring my agreements? Like, what will that look like in action? I break it up into these larger categories and then we offer each other questions. We just try to stay in a question phase. Questions like, what frequency of contact would you like during any given day? We live together, and we both work together now, so it really means that for us, that's the question. For somebody else, it might be, what level of contact would you like? Like when I'm dating somebody new, that's one of the first questions. Let's co-create. How many times a day or week or month or year even? I mean, I have people comets, they pass in and out of my life that, I see on a very infrequent basis. And that's fine because we co-created that.
Yes.
I'll see you, on the order of many months.
Exactly.
And it'll be exciting.
Exactly.
And so the idea is to come up with an agreement that I think of it as you want a flexible, but most importantly, resilient agreement. So you want the agreement. You want it to be explicit. Explicit is super, super important.
Yes. Because
the implicit assumptions are what make boilerplate monogamy not a great fit for somebody who wants clarity. It's not the monogamy. It's the assumptions.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes.
And then I have to be careful about not limiting my imagination about what my partner might want.
Yeah.
So it's going into these conversations with total curiosity.
Wow.
Letting him be whoever he is now, letting him change. And that was a hard one lesson. My family of origin really struggled, and still struggles, I think, to let each other update, let each other become something new and different.
Yeah. Can you say more?
So that's, like, well, think about the grandmother who still sees you as a 16-year-old and is like still not sure why you're driving.
Yeah.
Or or even like an older cousin who's telling you like, who's like ribbing you like you're little kids, as if you're little kids, or a partner who still thinks that you want the same things that you wanted when you were in your 20s. I'm in my mid 40s now. They are extraordinarily different.
Yes.
And when it came to my parents and my parents' families, the inflexibility I don't believe it's out of harm, but they want stability for themselves. If you change, then I might have to make space for that in myself, and then a lack of trust that I will let them change too. What I've decided is somebody has to go first. So I try to just go first and allow people to tell me who they are now. That's a practice. I mean, I do not do it perfectly.
I'm assuming that means asking more questions rather than coming from a place of knowledge about who they are.
Yeah, asking more questions and really being ready to receive with curiosity the answer they give you today. And I struggle with this. Like on a Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENTJ. Okay, so like I come at the world as if I know everything. Yes. I'm such a know-it-all, right? But when I face a human, a person, I have to actually set it down. And I'll do it symbolically before a conversation. Like, right, remember, you don't know who this person is because you're not in there.
Yeah.
And then miraculously, at times, you find out that the person who you thought they were and they now aren't, great, no problem, because this new person is so freaking awesome. It's amazing.
Yes.
So that's the payoff.
Yes.
Like that's what it's worth. Lots of questions and lots of patient curiosity.
Yeah.
Did not come easy.
Exactly. And I'm thinking about this within the terms of the concept of desire, coming back to this lens of, instead of saying, I know who this person is, I'm thinking in like a partner, more sexual lens, like, I know who they are, I know what they want, I knew all this stuff. And then in that, you feel like you have, some sort of possessive, possession over who they are and what they are, and you kind of already know.
Right.
And in that, obviously, you're not going to have as much desire because you feel like you already know. Part of desire means that othering, that space.
Othering. Exactly.
Yeah, feeling that independence of that human. And so when you come to them instead saying, I don't know where you're at. You're constantly changing as well. Keep telling me where you're at. And in that, then you feel that othering, and that desire can come because you see the independence of a fully separate human from yourself.
Totally.
Yeah.
This is the core. The idea of, what Buber called I, thou, or I think of the capital S self versus your capital O other. The idea of really honoring that otherness is the most intimate and arousing thing I've ever come across. By far.
Yes.
Because also the idea that you can have your body can have adjusted to this person and like you're on a cellular level, you can have this knowing and yet allow your mind, allow your intellect to expand so that your body can be in this open, comfortable, regulated state. At the same time, you're letting yourself question, like, okay, maybe this is the metaverse. Maybe
up in here.
Yeah, because that for me is like, I not only do I not have to have other partners in order to be polyamorous, one of the things I have to do is just let my partner be multiple.
Yeah.
Let them really be different at different times, not just on a large scale, not just changing like a developmental path, but like who they are this moment to that moment.
Yeah. What a beautiful metaphor. I'm thinking about that for the relationship, thinking about polyamory and the fact that your partner changes, and even if it's the quote unquote same human form, body, voice sort of things, like your partner evolves and changes and you end up having these different relationships with just that person.
Right. That's what, so my wonderful analyst, Thayer Green, he was the first one who put it this way to me, and I love it. He said, well, I've been married almost 70 years. And we've had, I think, 8 or 9 marriages now.
Yes.
I'm like, right.
Yes.
Right. And that's just such clear language. I think everybody gets this.
Yep.
Like you have like your dating marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have your settling into this newlywedish or cohabitating phase, right? But then there are all these markers that happen, and some of them just happen. There's not even any line in the sand. There's no big thing that happens. You just look back and realize, oh, we evolved, we shifted. And sometimes I think we think of that as a we, like glommed together, but really you have these two individuals who changed, and the space in between them was changed. And this is where I find Jung's transcendent function so helpful. The idea that two things coming into relationship is the only way the third thing can be born. It's the only way the third, like this chemical interaction is the way that the third thing comes into being. Mm-hmm. Okay, well now multiply that across time and change, and now you will have birthed, in a metaphorical sense, so many new things that couldn't exist if the two of you didn't relate as new beings over and over again.
Over and over again.
Right.
Completely.
Which is why I do love long-term relationships. A lot of people talk about like letting go of that and just, enjoying the moment with, lots of new partners. I'm like, that's fine too. But, long-term relating allows for a different kind of multiplicity. They're very different.
Yes. And I'm just so like erotically charged by the thought of the stability of finding safety with another human, another body, feeling also the multiplicity of that human. I was just really in that thought that you were expressing, and how, safe it can be to explore the erotic, stability and expansiveness all at once, whether that be sexual, romantic, or whatever, that sort of connection that you're sharing with someone.
Right. Right. And I found this to be the most therapeutic relating I've ever done. What I'm doing with my husband, our sex life is probably one of the most therapeutic things that has ever happened in my life. Yeah. And I've been doing a lot of work for a long time at this point, 30 years later of therapy. And it is a place in which my body can receive very differently than it could in any other space. And so really, I actually find new layers of consciousness available within that container they weren't available. It's not like he magically brought this to me. We made it, we created it, and we continue to.
Yes. And
that at that point, our relationship becomes as close to magic as I know could exist.
Yeah. What do you think?
Couldn't force it.
Right. What do you think is that healing energy? What do you think it is? I could guess, but I want to hear.
Yeah. I mean, I think one, that the cellular level, that somatic security and safety. Jung talks about the contained and the container, and there's a very gendered way that we think about this, but really just it's like a Klein bottle. The contained is the container. It's both, right? The idea that at different moments in any particular erotic exchange, one or the other of us is holding a firm enough container to allow the other to dissolve, at which point, who knows what's going to come forth? Who knows what comes out of that? I really can't predict. I can't know for certain. So we go into it as this adventure. You don't know what's going to unfold. Perhaps the adventure will end in simply some pleasure.
Yep.
Perhaps it ends in a fight.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Right.
But perhaps, and this has happened as recently as this week, a new part, a new aspect of myself, boom, revealed. Like just, okay, I didn't know that was there. Did not know that was there. Okay, now what? And that happens regularly, but it's because of this ability to contain with a person. And I've felt this with multiple people in a relationship as well, like an ability to really contain, even in what could ostensibly be called a purely sexual experience. If the containment is really beautifully held, right? The body needs to feel a level of safety.
Yes.
To let, for me at least, for that to happen.
Yes, same. Completely.
It's also a place where, and my partner is completely fine with me sharing this, it's a place where you can play with what is gender? What what is orientation? What does it mean to be attracted, right? Like inside of that container.
Yes.
And he has experienced massive explosions of growth in his gender understanding by existing inside of my containment, by allowing me to hold that space.
Yeah.
I don't know where else he would find that. Neither of us does. And we've been seeking a long time.
Yeah. I know. I'm so curious, like, what this exploration is. And I like whether it's obviously private or not in his journey, you know, but I'm just like, wow, what do you learn?
I could say this. When you are feeling safe enough to allow yourself to not only do a thought experiment about what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? But to allow yourself to enter into it, gender bending play, and allow yourself to really embody it. Now there's a different level of understanding. It's starting to be felt different. That then, through a process of debriefing and talking about it afterwards, now it becomes incorporated. It's not just we had a fantasy and we played it out, but now, who is the woman inside of you? Who is the, I don't care how wide your shoulders are and how beefy your calves are. Who is the woman inside of you? Now we're having a conversation that I don't know another way in for us. This was the way. And it's not a conversation that would play out the same if we kept it only in the realm of the intellect. Yes. Even though that is my default. Like, that is where I have defaulted to my whole life.
Sure.
But the body.
Sure. And the body and, you know, sex or whatever words you use to describe that, it's a way of relating to one another. So here, you know, your partner's taking on this moment to think about the gender expression in terms of relating to another person, not just philosophical ideas, but how do I actually embody that and connect with another human in front of me? Yes. Hugely different.
So different. Yes. So different. And that's one of those times when, I can look back and see a line that happened because of how we were exploring erotically. I can look back and say, in 2021, in early 2021, there was another shift. And nothing will be the same going forward. Now we're in a new evolution of what we're doing together. And, you know, and then in 21, I dated like 10 other people. Like, it didn't mean that I wasn't also exploring, that he wasn't also exploring. But this thing was so deep. Yeah. It was so intense.
Wow.
That's one of the joys to me of having multiple loving experiences is we were having, you know, different types, different kinds of experiences. The relationships had different purposes, different whys, different reasons. Yes. Which made it really exciting to explore all of them.
Yeah, leaving that infinite openness. I mean, coming back to a lot of the poly, you know, relationship anarchy, whatever we want to call it, you know, I always like to believe that love is abundant, but the time and energy isn't. You know, that is such a reality piece. Is you cannot just like
so real.
Splatter your love and everything across so many different relationships. And if you try, what you'll find is that you're only giving like, splatters. You know, and
it becomes hard to have time for ourselves.
Yep. Where's me?
Right? Is that actually just an avoidance? I have definitely fallen into that before where I'm like, ooh, I'm avoiding my relationship to myself by splattering myself across many, many people. And then I have to really think about that. Where does my time come? And not just being alone, but just time to not be prioritizing the dating process or because I find that I'm always in relation. Like, I can't even be in my own house without being in relation. 5 of my children still live here full time with me. I am. It's always relational.
Yes.
And prioritizing that relationship to self, which I find I do better in polyamory than I did when I was practicing monogamy because I leaned toward codependence.
Ooh.
So I would forget to have a relationship to myself.
Oof.
We would just get enmeshed, which is not the only way that people do monogamy, but it's certainly the way I did it.
Yeah.
It's how I was taught to do it.
Same. Yep.
Like, my dad was very clear. He was like, codependence is a choice. Mm-hmm. We love it. Like, with that word. Which is so funny, but when you have an ability to see your relationship to yourself, everything changes. But you know what? You were right about the time. I mean,
it's hard. Yeah. Are you okay?
I can't.
You have so much.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's this summer, like everything lightened up. It wasn't super tight, quarantine anymore. I felt like I could take some explorations out again. And I dated, and one of the things that I found was, right, I can't really have any other hobbies when I'm dating like this. It's like it took up all of my hobby time. And then it started to seep into it's actually taking all of my time to attend to my own just being with me.
Yep.
So I had to scale back again.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, we find ourselves back in, mostly quarantine. And I'm like, I don't know that I would have thought to do that. I think those of us who extrovert really well, right? It's easy to just like push out and fill the calendar.
Yep.
But it's not the only thing that's multiple, because I'm a multiple.
Exactly.
As well.
And to find that, you need to set aside intentional time with yourself. And I love that you took a moment to say that you're also relational. You have all these different relationships that are a part of your identity, but also, that relationship to yourself being so important as well. And I think that's something some people, myself included, sometimes forget to cultivate and invest time in. But knowing that by doing that, you're able to show up better in your other relationships. I kind of feel personally like language fails me to describe what you're doing, what I'm doing. I get hesitant. I mean, poly is the best word. But even that, I just feel like it comes with these slew of expectations, these ideas, these things, when really I just want the freedom to create and relate to people,
Right. Right. I talk about this all the time because I think that the first step, and I'm sure that most clinicians do this, you have to establish vocabulary with your clients. Yeah. Right? That's like right up front. Yep. Make sure you know what they're talking about. Figuring out how to create the shared vocabulary for one relationship. Okay, cool. So you do that, and that's work. And now to figure out how to do that with other people, and then with their metamors who may have other different meanings. I don't think there is one best word. I try to be really careful. I use the term consensual non-monogamy the most frequently. I try to use that term. And the reason I use it is I'm like, well, it's big and has room in it for almost everyone who's doing things where they're not lying. But it doesn't really describe in a heart sense. Like my gut doesn't feel that word. Whereas, polyamory for me, my gut gets that word. Mm-hmm. So I use it. But I like to relate to my partner's partners. I like to relate I like knowing the web, knowing the constellation. I love that. Mm-hmm. And not everybody does. Mm-hmm. I work with lots of people who want to do a creative agreement where it's not exactly don't ask, don't tell, but they're not involved with each other. There's a lot of space between partners, especially partners that they don't see very frequently. And I've seen it work. I've seen it work really well. Yeah. Yeah. So I think you're right. Language fails us because there aren't enough words yet. We're still populating this lexicon. Yep.
And it's part of, our job as clinicians and researchers to either create those words or to pull it from the community and listen to the community and ask, what words should we be using for this? Because I get non-monogamy, but I hate the language of non.
Yep. Defining something by what it's not?
Yes, as if Weird. The thing that it is the right thing, so we must say that we're not that thing. I hate that framework, and it's like, God, I want something better, which is why I kind of like the relationship anarchy idea to say, oh, I'm a relationship anarchist. I create from nothing. I start from zero expectations. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And yet that word is challenging too, because for me, I'm like, I don't have enough political and philosophical background to fully own the word anarchy. I just don't know how yet. I've never spent my energy doing it. So I never use that word for myself, even though I think I practiced a bunch of parts of it.
Yeah.
But because I didn't, and I know that there are people who feel so strongly like that word holds their foundation. It's so essential for them. And I'm like, oh, okay, I want to leave that there as this beautiful piece of art that they're using. And I still haven't gotten close enough yet to fully appreciate it.
Interesting.
But also, I have a lot of children. And that has meant needing to have some areas where I am 100% stable. Mm. So when I meet someone who is So, for instance, just unwilling to be involved and like understand and know my constellation, that may fit into their what their imagination is of relationship anarchy. They don't want to know that. I'm like, oh, but I need to. So I use the word polyamory to kind of separate myself in that way and put myself over into a camp of like, well, my family is part of it. All of my family, my chosen family, my friends.
Yeah.
But then it silos us.
Yes.
Then we wind up getting separated from each other.
Yeah. Well, so I'm so curious about this because for me, I've done, this relationship anarchy word is thrown across the board, right? And at least within the poly community and this non-monogamy community, yet when I go to the psychological literature, there's not a single article on it.
Right.
Yeah, and there's...
Right, it's still so nascent.
Exactly. There was one article from some feminist in Spain talking about it. And so for me, for my dissertation, this is specifically what I want to look at is relationship anarchy. How are people creating their own relationships? And so I'm so intrigued because, I hear from you this freedom and abundance to create the life that you want to create and constantly check in without a hierarchical system. And so I would want to be talking to you and interviewing you and having your words because it sounds like it, but then not connecting to that
then
word.
I'm like, not connecting to the word. And that it can be as simple as, like, I know people who will not use the word compersion. They just don't like the way the word feels in their mouth, so they won't use the word. And I'm like, okay, cool. There's other words that can work, like mudita or confelicity. There are other words, so we can work on that. I've literally had people just reject that word in my practice and be like,
don't like it.
So then, if we're specifically, they come to me because I work in jealousy, so we're working on jealousy. Like, well, we need something else to be able to invite into the space, not to get rid of jealousy, but because we want to also invite what's intention with jealous. But a word can throw somebody off.
Yes, completely.
So the chair of my committee was actually, she was like, I hate that word. I hate it. I just hate it. And it was great. It was a wonderful conversation because then I was like, oh, started looking around. Lots of people don't like it.
Huh.
Fascinating. Because if people don't like a word, then it won't get the usage that we want it to have, right?
Yeah.
Why don't people have budgets? I think the word budget is just like poor marketing for planning your finances, right? Like it needs a sexier word. I think like compersion might have some of that attached to it. I'm seeing more of that pushback. And I think that there are other words. So I think anarchy actually has a sexiness to it.
Yeah,
right?
it does.
Anarchy like pulls you in.
Yeah.
It makes me curious. So my own, I almost feel like I have it a bit on a pedestal.
Interesting.
I actually have like I look at it from afar. I can feel myself sort of considering it, but not quite feeling like I can lean into it or claim it.
Interesting.
Right? But I couldn't really tell you why. Language.
Because it sounds like exactly what you're doing, creating.
Yeah, it is in so many ways. The practices are, though I will say I have no problems deciding, like using the word hierarchy doesn't scare me. Because I like to use it as a description to be very clear about where I'm spending my time and my energy. And so that doesn't scare me. And I've had other people say, well, if you're going to use the word hierarchy, if there's going to be any hierarchy, then you can't be an anarchy. And I'm like, what if we could? Yeah, this is where the language is everything.
I have this Post-it note that I wrote, and I was like, maybe the answer is not found in the abolishment of hierarchy, but rather the acknowledgement of its malleability.
Yes.
I think it is, as someone who's trying to practice from this anarchy point, it is impossible to just be like, everyone's equal. Everyone's equal. No one has importance. There is some reality to the fact that, you might share a mortgage with another human. That is, quote unquote, a hierarchy of different relationships than I don't share that level of financial, and for you, co-parenting or these other things. Like, it is absolutely impossible to just be completely equal.
And not to mention the fact that I think doing our anti-racist work, we've been charged with, hey, stop focusing on equal and fair and start focusing on equity and that we don't hear a lot about that in relationships, right? Like what my girlfriend last summer, what she needed was very different from what my husband needed in terms of time and connection, right? And it was easy to find equity, but equal would have been impossible. Impossible. We had actual lives that would have precluded equalness.
Yes, exactly.
And I see people in my practice constantly, the place where they hiccup the most is around wanting to move at the same pace. We need to have everything be fair. They want the relationships, like their explorations to be fair. I'm like, it can't be.
Because of the multiplicity of the different humans. Like,
right.
we have different personalities, different things that bring us joy. And, you know, the introverted person might not want to go out and date a million people because that just doesn't bring them joy. So it's not going to make them happy to be like, well, you need to be dating as many people as I'm dating so that it's all equal fair.
Right. Because then I'll feel safe.
Yes.
Wait. Yeah, my husband does not. He's very shy. So he doesn't date nearly as much as I do. And yet, I could go monogamous before he could, by a long shot.
Interesting.
He could behave monogamously, but asking him to commit to that word, he'd throw up.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, nope, no way. That philosophically opposed. It does not fit. It doesn't even make sense to him. And it never did. Like, it never did, even when he was very young. Whereas I could make the decision as a philosophical choice and say, okay, I'm committing to it the same way someone might commit to entering a religious practice and being like, this is my commitment.
Yes.
But I can't actually imagine doing it. You know why?
Why?
Because 90% of my day is spent thinking about topics that touch this. So it's my head constantly. So it has to have, it has meaning for me.
Yeah.
I can't, that would be actually like cutting off my reason for being, for existing.
Completely.
Like, this is what I was here to figure out. Yep. For me, my angle on it.
And I feel very much so with you. I could be sexually fidelitous if that's what I wanted.
Right.
I could live in with a person if that's what I wanted, but something about the word, again, here we come back to language, monogamy, because it has all of these expectations with it, that I just philosophically could not be monogamous, although I could sleep with one person for the rest of my life if that's what I wanted.
Right. Yeah, that's the easy part. Honestly, I mean, and what does that even mean for the rest of my life? None of us knows how long we're going to live anyways. Right?
Completely. And I try to explain to people that sometimes I have conversations that could feel so more intimate than even, you know, a physical sexual encounter. And now we're talking about intimacy and what, you know, and that's another thing that comes in with this monogamous piece where some people get into these relationships and then we'll be like, well, you're spending too much time with this friend and disclosing too much intimacy, and emotional cheating is a word that comes around too. And
that one.
Yeah. And it's just,
that's where that's exactly what I couldn't wrap my brain around at the very beginning. I was like, so I have had close friends my whole life. People who attended my births, who one of them gave me a waxing once. Like, we had been all up in each other's stuff, as well as the fact that they knew things that no one else did. They knew things my partner did because they actually could understand things my partners couldn't understand. So it wasn't even intentional. It was just not possible. And so when I was accused of having an emotional relationship, I was like, yeah. Yes. They all are. Exactly. I don't know what to do now.
Exactly.
Hence the 5 months to a divorce.
Wow.
Because I literally couldn't make sense of it anymore. I was like, I don't know what to do. And the sad part is I didn't actually want to lose that relationship.
Yeah.
I didn't want to lose the friendship that we had since we were kids. But the expectations of monogamy made it so that, I'll put it this way. I think this is kind enough. He needed a villain. And I needed to be the villain.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was willing to take that because I needed an out.
Yep.
And now I'm willing to carry it because I actually see that villain a lot like Maleficent. No, not evil, truth.
Complex. Yep.
Complex. Not one-sided. So I'll wear that mantle if need be. If
that's what you had to.
If that's what it has to be. Because patriarchal monogamy doesn't actually support me in any way. No. I feel unbeholden to it in any way because it supports me not one tiny bit.
Nope. Not
and
at
if we
all.
look at the research, it's very young. It's not that old of a concept.
Thank you. This is exactly what I'm writing in my dissertation. Looking back at this concept, you know, starting from that agricultural, when we started owning land, property, and saying, this is mine, went away from that hunter-gatherer shared community to possessiveness. Then we start having, this is my land, this is my wife, you know, I have ownership over this. And, you know, how can we learn to re-relate to other people and take off this lens? And then I think in that, then you ask these deeper questions of, what does it mean to have intimacy here through emotional, through physical, through acts of romance, you know, and other things. And then you start realizing that, wow, it's not as equally put into boxes as we really think. And I think that when we try to put ourselves in boxes, what we're doing is blunting off the meaning and significance of some of these relationships that you could totally have, you know? And because instead it's, you know, the deepest form of authentic expression is with my romantic partner, like that kind of concept versus, no, I have deep intimacy with my quote unquote friends, even that word's a little bit hierarchical, and having meaning from that. Like that is profound.
This is where all the opportunity is. There's so much opportunity here. It's like looking at the world through as if, you know what it reminds me of is in the movie Interstellar, where he falls into 5-dimensional space. And you're like, okay, nothing's going to ever look the same. You can't unsee it once you start to consider it. And that doesn't mean you need to practice. I actually have lots of clients who practice essentially patriarchal monogamy. They've committed to it. They don't want an out. They don't want to make it a real thing in their life, but they're committing to an intellectual practice of opening themselves.
Beautiful.
And that, I see like there's so much hope in that as well, because now their friendships are different. Their relationships to their children are different. And that unpacking, you don't have to start with your marriage. You could start with any relationship.
Any of it. Yeah. I've been reading this book called Ace.
By Angela Chen's book.
Oh my God, do I love. Absolutely. I could just it's so juicy and it feels so good to read these ideas and pushing myself to think, okay, within the asexual community, how do they look at relationships and what does that mean for them? And then what does that change about how I look at my relationships? And it is just,
So I know a depth psychologist you should talk to because she's writing her dissertation on asexuality right now.
Great. That is exactly what I've wanted. I've been looking for that person, and I'm sure you know it's the nomination process. So, like, I will talk to them next if that's who you pick. Hell yeah.
Love it. Love it. It's exciting to see these conversations happen. Yes. For real.
Yes.
Like, this is how everything changes.
Yes. Yes. And I'm so itching for the right language. Liberated love was kind of what I had been sitting on from this weekend. Just this like concept of looking at what it means to love and care for other people. But I'm so eager if you ever think of words that you feel like sit better with this creative. And I've been holding on to that too, creating relationships rather than starting from a expectation and putting ourselves into boxes.
Right. And this is, to me, the work of maturing. Like, this is what you can do. Whatever age and stage and phase you're at in all of your other work, this is another piece of the puzzle. This is another whole way you can look at how does the world work and how will I find my way in it? This can be part of what it is to grow up.
Yes. Mature
Very
emotionally
exciting.
And relationally. Yes.
Right.
I am just like already overflowing with the abundance of ideas, and I love where you're at and all this research that you've done. And it's been so nice to have, you know, another person. I'm sure you sometimes feel this as, you know, someone who's practicing a minority thing, where sometimes you're just having to fight to have people see this world that you envision and the way that you look at relationships. And so I always find so much significance in having these conversations where someone else is like, yes, I see the world, you do too.
Right.
And I'm like, thank God, please, I'm not alone. I'm not, you know, fighting for this reality.
Not alone at all. I have such hope because every week I meet more people who want to understand what they can do to simply crack this open and start exploring. That's where it begins, like every time. Plus, I have a house full of teenagers who remind me that nothing is fixed in stone.
Yes, nothing at all. We are constantly moving. Is there anything that you feel like before this podcast you were like, I really wanted to say today so that I could leave some space for you here now?
Yeah, you know, we didn't wind up talking about jealousy, which is not like directly, which is totally fine. But I would say this, the work I've been doing around jealousy recently has me opening my eyes to the fact that jealousy has immense wisdom. I'm approaching jealousy as a neutral experience to which we assign meaning and figure out what it's for. And I'm just inviting people to start turning curiosity to that. I know it can be hard at the beginning because jealousy is big. But if you approach your own experiences of jealousy with just the curiosity of like, what is this bad? Is this actually all negative, or are there other things going on too? Is there also arousal, curiosity, and intensity that I find interesting for some reason? Because I'm hearing more and more people want to practice alternative ways of relating. And so jealousy is going to be one of the pieces we have to deal with.
Yep. I know so many people who, when I talk about non-monogamy, the first thing they say is, I'm a jealous person. I could never do that.
Exactly. It is the most common thing. It's when people tell me that, I say, I hear you. And what my research says is that jealousy isn't what we've been taught it is. It's more complicated than that. So there are other questions to ask yourself. And I don't know any monogamous people who've never experienced jealousy. So if you actually want this, jealousy doesn't have to be the reason you don't have it. But you will have to learn how to deal with jealousy, because jealousy can be the instigator of violence, the instigator of harm, the instigator of trauma. So it does require conscious attention. But when people say, I'm a jealous person, I'm like, me too. I've been studying this. I tattooed the thing on my freaking back.
Did you really?
Accidentally. It's actually how all this started. I tattooed the kanji. I did. I tattooed the kanji symbol for zeal onto my back. Yeah. Thinking zeal. Yeah. Intensity for all of life. Yeah. The Greek root of the word jealous. And that was on the day that all of this started.
Wow.
Yeah. The universe just had plans for me.
Synchronicity.
Exactly.
Young just was like, here you go. This is going to be your journey.
Exactly. Thanks.
No, but I love it.
And the thing is, I still experience jealousy, and it no longer has me in its grips. And when it does, I know what to do. That makes all the difference, knowing what to do when it shows up for me. And it's a very personal experience, means that I can tolerate things that I used to think meant that my relationship was broken. But in fact, the feelings just have stuff to show me and teach me.
Exactly. Yeah. And for me, I feel like that jealousy personally comes back to this, just deep sense of fear. Someone might leave.
Totally. The fear can't be separated. I mean, I think it's worth naming. You can't separate fear from jealousy, because at root, it is made of fear that we'll lose our love object, right? Like that's what it is. So we don't want to say, oh, you'll never be afraid again. But if I knew that what I was afraid, or if I was afraid and angry, or afraid and sad, well, now what tools do I use when I'm afraid? What tools would I use when I'm angry? Most of us have some tools for these things. But when we call it jealousy, we throw it under a blanket and we're like, okay, it's under the blanket of jealousy, which means my partner needs to change something so that I feel differently.
Exactly.
And then we don't actually have control of ourselves and our experience, because we've put it under this blanket. And now that blanket also is, its edges are definitely shamed. So now we have another problem. It's a weighted blanket.
It's so, a restricting weighted blanket. It is, because then it's shame, jealousy, scare, all these other things. And to just blanket say, well, because I'm jealous, I can't do this. It just writes off that whole freedom to explore deeper levels of where this work and, what you started with, the subconscious. Where is all this coming from?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's where I say, what if you explored this anyways, and explore at first from a place of sexual fidelity? Do that. Yeah. Explore all these. There's so many other places that we can explore this. Sexual fidelity is one tiny piece of it. It's just one that our cultural history puts a lot of weight on. But I say, start with any other part of your fidelity to explore with. And then we'll talk about whether sexual is even part of what you're looking at. Exactly. Like whether that's even part of the equation, because it might not be.
Exactly. And that's totally okay. Completely okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, I could probably talk to you for hours and just about this stuff. Like, yes, these are all the ideas that are bouncing around in my head constantly.
Yeah. So exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. Yeah, I'm very excited to do this work and to study this population and to hopefully create more language for us to use to express these things.
Right. That's it. We just keep doing the research, keep creating the language.
Yep. One of the things I do ask everyone on the podcast, this closing question, is what is one thing that you wish other people knew was more normal?
Oh, gosh. Okay, as a sex educator, I think I say that's normal, the most frequent of all sayings. But I'm going to go with the obvious one, that it is completely normal to love more than one person.
Oh, yes.
Romantically even. It's completely normal. What you choose to do with that is up for debate and question and negotiation, but it's completely normal to fall in love with, to be in love with, to feel loving feelings toward other people.
I love that. Yeah, that distinction between the feelings and the behaviors. You know, I do not think you can control your feelings.
Yeah.
And that is...
I have not...
Yep.
If somebody knows how, cool.
Yeah, please inform us.
Let us know.
Yeah, please, whenever you get that.
I think they call that Thorazine, and we took that off the list because it doesn't work that well to just numb all of our feelings.
Exactly. And so it's normal to love, to have those feelings. And then from there, you, as the autonomous being that you are, get to choose what behaviors, what choices you want to make with those feelings.
Exactly.
And that's up to you completely.
There's your journey.
Yes. Oh, it has been so lovely to chat with you. Is there somewhere that you want to plug if people want to learn more about your work, connect with you, and yeah.
Yeah, I would love it if people are interested in especially the jealousy piece, or in having the beginning of a conversation about what you really want. If you go to listentojoli.com, listen to Joli, Joli, you can grab my 5 free downloads, and one of them is a summary of my jealousy cognitive framework, and another is my how to have the what the heck is our sex life conversation. So just like great ways to start flipping over some tables and make a new knowledge.
I love that. Let's flip over some tables. There's the anarchy.
Exactly.
Yeah, this has been so fun. I'm glad to have connected with you and just got to share the space and hear your world and your thoughts. It seriously means a lot for me to have someone else in the same headspace.
It's been a total pleasure. And yeah, this is not the conversation I expected. It was just like, yeah, pure joy.
Yes.
Couldn't be better.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. If you enjoyed today's episode, then leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you're a part of the anarchist community, then follow us on Instagram or nominate a guest for the show by sending in a letter to modernanarchypodcast@gmail.com. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.